I want you to watch this clip of Piers Morgan asking Douglas Murray whether he holds all Palestinians culpable. That was one of Piers's inference from Douglas's words, saying they're somehow all culpable for what's happened in Gaza on October 7th and all of that. And I want you to watch the question that he puts to Douglas, what he based it on, and Douglas's response, and then we're going to unpack this very important question around collective responsibility.
I want to play you a clip. This is from an Israeli podcast with Elon Levy that you did in March about, well, you seem to infer something about all Palestinians being complicit. I want to play the clip and then get your response to it.
I treat the Palestinians in Gaza in the same way I would treat any other group that produced a horror like that. They're responsible for their actions. They're responsible for their actions. They voted in Hamas knowing what Hamas are. They allowed Hamas to carry out the coup, killing Fatah and other Palestinians and dragging their bodies behind trucks in the West Bank, in Gaza.
Do you actually hold all Palestinians culpable then for what Hamas have done?
Well, all Palestinians aren't, as it were, free game just because of this. No, not at all. Of course not. And all their lives matter. The point I made there, and the point I've made for many years now, is that you cannot separate out completely the Palestinian people and their leadership. The leadership is there for a reason. They get elected, albeit they tend to have one election once and then just stay in power, as is the case with the PA in the West Bank, and as is the case with Gaza in Gaza with Hamas. I've had many conversations with many Palestinians over many years now, in which they have tried to say, well, look, you know, we don't like our leadership, or our leadership isn't good, but you know. The thing is, Piers, is that if you have a vote, for instance, and you vote for Hamas, then there are consequences to that. And for all of these years, Hamas has been ruling the Gaza. It would obviously be much better for the Palestinian people if they had not voted in a genocidal terrorist group as their government.
But there is a but. There's a but, Douglas. There's a but. And it says the majority of Palestinians actually did not vote for Hamas. They got 44% of the vote. So it's not true to say that the majority of Palestinians, or all of them, voted for this. They didn't. You know, more than half of Gaza, of the Palestinian people there, voted against these people. And
the majority, according to recent polling, support October 7th, both in Gaza and Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. But I'll get into that further once we finish this clip.
You could also say that many others who voted for them might well have done because they were terrorized into doing so. And I just think that we've got to be careful, haven't we, about distinguishing between people who genuinely, vocally support Hamas and people who are either terrorized into doing so or who actually voted against them and have then seen their country dragged into an abyss. And I completely agree with you about everything you say about Hamas, and that absolutely no way can they have any power coming out of this. But to blame all Palestinian people, I think, is a big stretch.
I don't blame all Palestinian people by any means. But look, Piers, if you just take the situation in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas is, I think, famously, as the joke goes, something like 18 years into his first 4-year term in office, leading the Palestinian Authority. And he's the guy, by the way, who David Lammy and others see as being the more viable negotiating partner. This man is less bad than Hamas, but so far away from being a good negotiating partner that, again, a deal that's been on the table for years, almost literally since 1948, he still can't come to the table on. This is the situation in the West Bank. I remember years ago, I was staying in Ramallah, and I was having meetings with young Palestinians and others, and they kept coming back to the same thing, which is, yes, these people are in power, but there's nothing we can do about it. And I remember once saying to one, you know, the problem is, whether it's Hamas in Gaza or the PA in the West Bank, all peoples who have been governed by terror entities like this are, of course, always themselves at risk. But the history of human liberation, apart from anything else, has always been people standing up to the tyrants who would rule over them and govern them. So when Hamas seizes control over Gaza after the election and kills the members of Fatah and others, they then make a deal with Fatah shortly afterwards, and then another one. So where is, the fine art of this, Piers, is to find the very obvious blue water between Fatah and Hamas, but they keep on destroying that clear blue water and making it very murky indeed.
But you mentioned the West Bank.
So there's plenty more to touch on, and we can do future videos through this interview, but I want to stick to this particular point. Douglas is so spot on in that final point there, that if, let's just say it is the case, and I'm not so sure that it is, but let's just say it is the case, that actually the majority of Arabs in Gaza and Judea and Samaria, the West Bank as it's known, that they are just terrorized into submission, that really they hate Hamas, they hate everything they do, but they're just terrorized. That can't be Israel's problem. If they're facing a genocidal enemy where the population are not prepared to overthrow the government, I can tell you this for certain. If Israel had an equivalent government as their government in Israel that was somehow fanatical, extremist, evil like Hamas was, I can guarantee you the Jewish people would make their voices heard. They would resist. They would topple that government. And if they can't do it for whatever reason, and they're terrorized into submission, if that is indeed the case, so Israel's therefore just got to accept it. Israel's just got to accept the situation. But unfortunately, Piers, it actually does look like that there is majority support for Hamas and for what happened on October 7th. Okay, there's been numerous reports. I'll just get one up on screen for you so you can see it. Okay, this is a report that shows that Palestinians, Arabs back October 7th attack. This was done by the Palestinian Center for Policy Survey and Research. And they've been doing this up until the last one I saw was just in June, just a couple months ago, where there's still vast majority support for what happened on October 7th, for the genocidal, evil, indiscriminate attack that Hamas did. Okay? And this is, by the way, isn't just in Gaza. This is in Judea and Samaria as well, among the Arab population. So it's not just, as Piers may wish to think, that it's just a minority that actually support Hamas. And we know this also from first-hand testimony of IDF soldiers going into homes, seeing the extremism. I mean, we know it from the fact that the hostages who said when they were dragged into Gaza, they said it was everywhere. There's a culture of celebrating killing Jews, hostility to Israel, anti-Semitism. They said it's absolutely everywhere. It's embedded in the society, not just in the government. There's not just a subordination and a submission to Hamas. There's a willful, joyful celebration of what they did and what they do. Think about the fact that some of the hostages that have been held were done so by civilians, so-called civilians. An Al Jazeera photojournalist was imprisoning hostages, which the IDF rescued. There's other instances of, well, look, forget other hostages. What about UNRWA? I mean, if UNRWA, the United Nations organization, has members who are directly involved in the October 7th attacks that are teaching their children to become martyrs, if that's just UNRWA, which is meant to be supposedly whiter than white, obviously it's not, but that's what it's supposedly, then obviously when you start to get just to the average day-to-day civilian life, you're going to see anti-Semitism everywhere. If even the international UN organizations are poisoned with Jew hate, then it is going to be everywhere. And so I think part of what happens with people in the West, and we saw President Biden do the same thing. He said Hamas don't represent the Palestinians. It's too painful. It's too daunting to think that actually they do represent most Palestinians. because it means the problem is seriously great, and it means that you're not going to get a resolution according to the conventional wisdom of the last 100 years, a two-state solution. That's not going to happen. It's not going to be one of those conflict resolutions. The conflict resolution is going to be where one side wins and the other side loses. That's how this is going to end. It's like World War II. Same thing. The Palestinian cause has always been based on an ideology that simply wants to wipe out the Jews, not based on a genuine cause of national self-determination. As Dr. Inat Wolf said on a recent interview we did with her, she said, Prime Minister Netanyahu should have responded to President Biden and said, Mr. President, thank you so much for all your support, but unfortunately Hamas do represent the deepest ethos of Palestinianism. So, yet again, Douglas is right. Piers is proposing a reality that simply is not true. And only through understanding the truth can you actually diagnose and move forward. I've been saying this a few times in videos now, and I'm going to say it more and more regularly, that yes, peace through strength, but how do you get that strength? You only get that strength when you know and understand the truth. So truth equals strength equals peace.
Thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.